Previously on RWBY. While it was revealed that Jean is in fact the Rusted Knight in Ever After, Blake and Yang confess their feelings to each other and they're now a couple. And this is on top of Weiss and Ruby having their own crossroads tied to both Penny and Summer Rose, the latter being Ruby's mother. In the beginning of Chapter 7, things get kind of interesting in the sense of Jean waking up late, as well as taking care of things in the village he's been living at, and information has come about pertaining to both the village, the Great Tree, and Curious Cat. It doesn't take too long before everybody started realizing that something is not quite right. Who has been omitting information? Who's been lying about information? Has John been telling the entire story? Has he been telling the truth? Has the Curious Cat been completely lying? This raises suspicions within the team, and by that, Team RWBY. It doesn't take long, however, before Jabberwockers storm the village and begun their attack on everybody, including Team RWBY and Jean. While everybody focuses on the remaining Jabberwockers, RWBY becomes extremely hesitant. And at some point, one of the Jabberwockers nearly kills RWBY. However, there are 3 images that RWBY is shown by Neo, who was one of the Jabberwockers. Now, RWBY is saved by the other 3 members of Team RWBY alongside Jean. It was not long after this that RWBY has reached her boiling point. Now, she does go after Weiss at first, but she focuses a lot of the arguments on Blake and Yang, more on the latter as opposed to the former. Now, when it comes to RWBY's outburst, she mentions Jean's friends being make-believe. However, Jean snaps back at RWBY. And Jean places blame on RWBY for everything that has happened. But one has to remember, has he been telling the truth? Has he omitted information? And at the end, RWBY takes off with only Little and Crescent Rose to an unknown destination, with Weiss being the only one out of the 4 really reaching out to RWBY, leaving the remaining members of Team RWBY in disbelief, shock, and in some format of sadness. Whereas for Jean and Juniper, their backs are turned on not only Team RWBY as a whole, but RWBY as an individual. Now we find out who will take over as the team leader. Will it be Blake? Will it be Weiss? Will it be Yang? Will it be Jean? Who really knows? Also, will there be any finger pointing? What will they do next? Will they leave RWBY alone? And as for RWBY herself, what are her next course of actions? Will she pursue Neo? Will she do her own journey about herself with Little as her guide? Will the tree make its visit to RWBY? Find out more in this review of Volume 9, Chapter 8. Hey guys, Wolfie here and welcome back to the channel. As always, the usual disclaimer, any opinion here is mine and mine alone. This is RWBY Volume 9, Chapter number 8, T Admits Terrible Trouble. I'm going to go into a few things here before I get into the meat and potatoes. Now, first and foremost, for the length of this particular chapter, it is the shortest we've seen in quite some time. Meaning that it is about 14 minutes if you take out both the intro and the ending credits. That's first and foremost. Second, as a whole, this episode is dark. Quite dark. And another thing I do want to mention here, beforehand is that I will have a separate video where a particular character who is seen alive at the end of volume 8, would things have happened differently if it were that's, you get the hint. Now, another thing here is that most of this episode is Ruby oriented, meaning that it's more on Ruby than anything else. And without any further delay, we're going to jump right into this. Now, the beginning of this particular episode, Ruby is by herself and running. It's in her point of view. Now, if you kind of remember this sort of thing, you notice it in earlier aspects of this volume alongside parts of volume 8. She was breaking apart since volume 8, and no one's paid attention to that since. And Ruby eventually makes it to a particular house. However, she splits from Little at the end. I think she was trying to save Little at this point. Now, there is a perspective from Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Jean with Juniper about Ruby. It's they realize that they haven't been paying attention, although I feel that some of the finger pointing is going to go on Weiss, because Weiss reveals that she's been paying some degree of attention to Ruby. The other two have not. Jean's not even zoned out at this point. So I do feel some of the finger pointing is going to go on Weiss. However, Yang's going to get some of the finger pointing as well. Because you have to think about it. She was more concerned about Blake for some time, as opposed to everything else that's been going on. And with that, the question is who's going to be blamed for everything that happened at the end of this particular episode. However, I do feel Jean's going to have some of the blame too, because he was finger pointing at Ruby for some of the things she had zero involvement in. And to put it into perspective, Ruby does end up drinking some format of tea that she was given by Neo. She separates from the team alongside Crescent Rose and Little, who has died here, as far as we know. That sort of thing. So we're going to be seeing some ascension from them. Now, another couple of key things to keep in mind here is that Curious Cat shows their true colors. Curious Cat also consumes Neo. It says in format of possession. Ruby gets tortured here pretty damn bad. And at one point, Ruby strikes somebody. It appears to be Oscar. She does have some blood on her hands. But I do feel that the whole thing, when Ruby strikes quote-unquote Oscar, which is who's not here in Ever After, I do feel that is a hint of what's to come in future content. Should we see that at some point? Now, the table, the people at the table are we see Pyrrha, we see Penny, we also see Leo Lionheart from the Haven Academy. We also see Clover. I know Roman's there, as well as Ozpin. Not Oscar, because Oscar comes a little bit later on, and she sees the streak, she sees the blood on her hands. I do feel we're going to be seeing Ruby versus Oscar on this one, because Oscar's got a lot of explaining to do, as well as Ozpin. So, there is some format of a confrontation between Neo and Ruby. And again, Ruby does drink something with a leaf on it. I believe it's a leaf from the tree. Ruby gets separated from everybody. Little comes with her alongside Crescent Rose. And then, you see from Yang's perspective, it's she saw what she just saw. Ruby's quote unquote gone, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ruby does go back to Remnant. Neo kills Little, and Little was trying to save Ruby from Curious Cat, but I think Neo was also trying to have something try to save her as well, but I wouldn't be surprised. We simply do not know that part. Now we're going to go into something I caught towards the very end, and said to like the positioning of Weiss, Blake, and Yang, as well as John with Juniper. Now they're all pretty much in separate positions, meaning that Blake and Yang are like holding on to each other, but Weiss is in a different spot alongside Jean. Now Jean, didn't get injured because Juniper was like, gave him, broke his fall. So he was the least injured, that sort of thing. But if you look at those positions very carefully, that's might mean Team RWBY splits. And I'm going to go into a theory. Actually, I did something on Team RWBY splitting up. But if you guys remember a particular part of Volume 8 where Weiss and Whitley were standing while everybody was seated, you probably noticed that it looks like another hint of Team RWBY splitting up. And if you think about it, like the aftermath, everything's all sorted out in Remnant. Weiss, the Sneeze stay behind, in Atlas, they have to do a complete rebuild. And we may see an Atlas at the end to be for the people. Now, regarding Neo, she realizes she fucked up so bad. Because she realized she blamed the wrong person. Because if you really think about it, RWBY had nothing to do with the deaths of either Pyrrha or Penny, although that was the guilt that RWBY has had. If you look at Leo, RWBY had nothing to do with that either. That was all Salem. If you look at Clover, RWBY had nothing to do with that. That was Crow's Semblance, and as well as Tyrion. If you look at Ironwood, he brought that onto himself. I mean, there's one individual I'm surprised that has yet to show up on the table. That's Watts, because he's a tech-savvy individual. And we do know there was like that for him, being like engulfed in flames. We simply do. I mean, some people may say, is he really dead? Is he not? That sort of thing. So, with that, we do know now, I should say, that John was right about Curious Cat, but he reached Curious Cat too late. And I do feel that, and this is going to be a prelude to my opinion on this, we're going to be seeing some fingers being pointed at each other. Meaning that Weiss is going to get some of the blame because Weiss had some information about RWBY, but she didn't disclose all that. Yang, however, might get the bulk of the blame because she wasn't paying attention. And what I'm about to say next is per usual for Yang, she assumes a lot. She doesn't really ask a whole lot of questions. She's assumed so much where it's like, now the fact that RWBY's gone and possibly going to the tree, Yang's like, I should have been asking questions. And we do know that Yang has a habit of assuming, because you have to remember that conversation between Yang and Weiss in Volume 5, Chapter 8, where Weiss reveals the truth about some aspects of her childhood, is that Yang was like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have assumed. But Yang doesn't really change from that. So with that bit out of the way, and it looks like I'm doing a hell of a lot better on time. This is a bit of a lot to unpack. So what do I think of this particular chapter? Now, yes, it is a very short chapter. Now, overall, it was executed quite well, but I will say this much. And that is, when it comes down to the perspective of RWBY from Weiss, Blake, Yang, and Jean, it left a little bit too much to be desired in the sense of, because the episode itself being too short, there should have been a few more minutes on them in the sense of like building up to like the finger pointing, because I do feel that Weiss and Yang are probably going to be pointing fingers at each other in the sense of like Weiss knew some information, but Yang wasn't paying attention. So I'm thinking Yang's going to blame Weiss for not saying anything. However, the finger's going to be pointing at Yang in the sense of like she really wasn't paying any attention. She was too concerned about Blake to really give a damn about her own sister. And the thing with Weiss is like Weiss should not be taking any of the blame, because you have to really think about it. And this is a prelude to a certain video I'm going to be doing on the topic. If you remember the whole thing with Volume 6 where Blake suggested Weiss go to Alice ahead of them alone, you have to remember the tone in Blake's voice could suggest that Weiss is to be kicked off the team. And then Yang blindly agreeing with Blake on this one. Why weren't Blake or Ruby asked about Winter? Because you have to remember, Jean was the one who came up with the idea later on in Volume 6 saying, hey, let's steal a plane to get into Alice like that. And by stealing a plane, one of theirs. So, if you think about it, why was no one really asking Ruby or Weiss for an idea or two? If you think about Weiss's idea, in like late Volume 8, it was actually a decent plan. So it's one of those things, it's like, why was no one asking things? There's just too much assuming going on. And now that Ruby is gone, what now? What do they do now? As well as, should they really be asking more questions? Yes. They also need to have some serious heart-to-hearts. And the whole thing with Yang, the reason why I do feel a lot of the blame is going to be on her is that you have to remember certain things about Tai. And by him, Tai Yang. Tai never really met, if you see him, it's like he's a bit of a recluse in the sense of Volume 4, the way you see him. Because some of the professors at Beacon were mentioning about, hey, try to find Ruby. He was like, we're good. Because Tai mentioned was like, there's a bigger issue he has going on at home, hinting at Yang. And Yang, she may realize, being in a relationship may not be the best thing for me right now, or something else. And there's another video this is going to be another hint of the Bumblebee video, is that one of the animators for Volume 9 revealed that Yang is pansexual. So, if you think about the whole thing with her and Blake becoming canon, those two, Yang and Blake, will need to have a very serious conversation in the sense of like boundaries. Are they exclusive? Whatever have you. Because if Yang is in fact pansexual, that means there's always that door opening to polygamy. Yang having multiple partners. Whereas Blake, who is bisexual, it's more or less a one person for her, whether it be one man or one woman. So it's one of those things where it's like, Yang's got some figuring out to do. And Yang also needs to start asking more questions, because we do know about more. She wanted something like that, but she hasn't been consistent on that. And the fact that nobody's bothered to ask about Winter, like back in some of the earlier volumes, it's like, this is one of those things where it's like, this is what Team Ruby deserves. Because there's too much assumption, not enough questions being asked, so on and so forth. Now pertaining to Ruby for the remaining 2 chapters of this volume, it's just more like I said, if this were to cancel right now, At least it's super open-ended. But to recap everything here, it is quite a dark episode. I honestly do feel that there's going to be a bunch of like fingers going to be pointed like towards people. To be more specific, Yang and Blake might be pointing fingers at Weiss because she knew certain information but chose not to disclose it. However, Yang and Blake might get the fingers pointed at them because they were too concerned about each other. They never bothered to ask. And with the fact that Blake's not really like saying or doing a whole lot, it's like, is it really Blake that's to blame? Because you have to remember that the plan she had back in Volume 6 is like, she never even bothered to ask why she was still the heiress to the Shanita's company. She never even bothered to ask. And then if you remember back in the Volume 1, Chapter 3, actually it's Chapter 2, not Chapter 3, Chapter 2. Volume 1, the second episode of the entire show. Blake assumed quite a bit about Weiss, and it's just like, seriously? This is like, because the fact that you got people assuming so much without asking questions, it's a recipe for disaster. And then we do know the end of the first volume that Weiss is like, I don't care if you're a faunus, white fang, whatever. If it's important, come to your team about this stuff, man. Just talk to us. This is the same thing that Penny was telling like parts of Team Ruby. It's just like, if it's something important, just come to talk to us. It's not that difficult. But it's like, it turns out that, and I do feel the team is simply not on the same page. And I do feel Team Ruby is going to go through a major split. Because, I mean, granted, Weiss has some questions of her own about Ruby, but it's like, she was practically the only one who realized her fuck up, and fast. She owned up to it, and has done, like, as much as she could for Ruby. And then you have to remember earlier on in Volume 9, Chapter 2, it's like, Ruby was telling Weiss the same thing. You did all you could for Atlas. So on that, to end this video, I mean, I just realized it's like a lot shorter than I anticipated, but I was able to get everything across. Like I said, I do feel that Jean is a dead man, but I also feel Neo is either gonna not return to Remnant at all, and stay in Ever After, and this has been a change of opinion of mine. It's either she stays behind in Ever After, or she too's gonna die. Sorry about that. So there's some stuff on the edge of my phone here, so. Now, the reason why I feel John is a dead man is because, again, there's a lot of information he has withheld. Now, Weiss, is kind of the same thing, but to a much lesser extent. And it's not her fault because, again, she was never really asked. Then if you look at the people like Blake and Yang, that's where I think most of the blame is going to go. Because the two of them have done the most amount of assuming in the entire team. Weiss was like questioning her abilities back in Volume 1 in the Badge and Burden two-parter. But she owned up to her mistake and just like, yo, time to squash that. However, if you think about some of Blake's actions, it's like, is she really the weakest link? The fact that has still assumed stuff about Weiss in Volume 6, it's like, I think we're gonna be seeing a team that needs a serious heart-to-heart, because oddly enough, the way things are going right now, Team Ruby is about to split. I think we're going to be seeing Ruby and Weiss, and Blake and Yang doing their completely own thing. And I do feel that Ruby's, as a team, is going to be will eventually completely, separate in the sense of, Ruby doing whatever, one place, Weiss back in Atlas, and then we simply don't know with Yang and Blake. But so to truly finish off this video, Yang and Blake have some explaining to do. They should have been questioning Weiss. Weiss is going to get some fingers pointed at her, but a lot of the fingers are going to be pointing at Blake and Yang. Jean is a dead man. And Neo, like I said, it's going to be a change of opinion here. Either she dies or she stays in Ever After forever. And I do feel that Oscar and Ruby are going to have a bit of a one-on-one fight because that whole image she saw of Oscar, he may be the one she kills. And that is all I have for that. But before I sign off, like I said, I do have a video, like a special presentation of some sorts, pertaining to Winter Schnee and how she could have made a difference in the events up to this point. So with Wolfie here, signing off, I will catch you all on the flip side.